All right, hey guys. I hope you are enjoying your snow day or your ice day. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I know that it's kind of annoying to have homework on your snow day, but we don't have a ton of time within Photoshop, so it's really important that we continue learning it, especially because your projects are due in 2 weeks, which more on that later, but the guidelines are currently on the resource section of Sakai, so I'd like you to check those out before next class. But anyway, also on Sakai is a folder called Photoshop Files Part 2, and that's what I'm working from here today. Before we get started, there are two things that I want to make sure I go over. The first, and I'm just going to open up an image for reference here. The first, if you remember our workspace here in Photoshop, we have our tools here on the left side, we have our main canvas here in the center, and we have our layers panel down here in the bottom right corner. This is a really important panel. If you guys remember from last time, it allows us to stack different elements on top of each other. You have to be clicked on the appropriate layer in order to modify that layer, and so on. One thing we didn't talk about last class is locking and unlocking layers. So you can see here that there's this lock logo here to the right hand corner of this layer. Today we're going to be dealing with selection tools and different things like that that allow you to select different parts of an image. It's really important that you unlock these layers before you start messing with the selection tools. Sometimes you won't see any difference one way or another whether it's locked or unlocked, but other times you won't be able to perform a function, or it's a different function if it's locked as opposed to unlocked. So to unlock the layer, all you do is go over to this lock icon here, which is on the right hand side of your layer, and just click it. And once you click it once, it's gone and the layer is unlocked. Like I said, some things you won't be able to realize one way or another, but as we get, moving on farther and farther, I'd hate for some glitch to happen just because the layer is locked. So make sure that the layer you're modifying is unlocked. All right, the other thing I want to go over real fast is, I know last time we were pulling a lot of images off of Google Images, and just as a quick refresher here, if I go to Google Images and I just find, any image here, and I copy that image, and I go back to Photoshop and File, New, it's going to create a canvas that's the size of the image that I copied, right? So click OK, I could paste it in here, and we're good to go. The only problem though is when we start doing some of these designs, which again in 2 weeks is when your design projects are due, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you want to make sure you're getting images that are big enough. This image here that I pasted on the canvas is certainly not big enough. If I go up to image and image size, you can see that it's only 460 pixels. It's not very big at all, especially considering that your the canvas size for your projects is going to be something along the lines of 1200 pixels, which still isn't that big, but anything this small is really bad. You want to stay away from working with images this size. So when you're in Google Image Search and you're looking for an image, the first thing I would recommend you doing is going up to Search Tools, Size, and making sure that you're looking for images that are only large, okay? So when I click this, it's going to filter the search, and that's my cell phone. Once we clicked this large filter option, when I scroll over the images, you can see that the sizes of those images are in the bottom left-hand corner of the thumbnail, and they're a lot bigger. So, for instance, the crop your image one that we've been using, that's 3,500 pixels wide. That's great. That's a big enough size for you to work with and not have to deal with any pixelation or anything like that, which happens when you use a small image and try to make it big. That's something you never want to do. That's kind of up there with like stretching an image unproportionally and making somebody look like fatter or taller than they are. Like that's not good. And the second cardinal sin with Photoshop is taking a small image and trying to make it big. So it's always important that you're dealing with a big image from the start. So let's find this one here. This is 4,800 pixels wide by 3,200 pixels tall. It's a very big image. That's great. So if I click this, and go to View Image and copy it and go back to Photoshop. File, New, here we are. So that's a really big canvas to work on, and that's going to ensure that as we start manipulating certain images, if we cut out something in this image, it's going to give us enough space to, enough size so that that image doesn't pixelate. So I'm going to open up a image that we used last time, crop this image. You guys probably remember that. So I'm just going to click and drag it over here into Photoshop. And last class we were working with cropping. So no, don't crop here. 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons down from your main base button, the Move button, is your crop tool. Now this is a really handy tool, as we showed last class, but one way that Photoshop is really nice is there's a lot of tools that allow you to actually manipulate and select pixels within an image. So cropping, you're just changing the overall size of an image. But a lot of times you need to be able to select pixels within an image. So quick review, all these images are made up of tons of pixels. So Photoshop is a pixel-based editor, which means that given certain tools, which one button underneath the Move button is the selection tools, if I can highlight different areas of an image and I could select those pixels and I can modify them however I want. Now I'm using these marquee selection tools or elliptical marquee tools or any of these underneath the Move button. Most of the time you're not going to be using these, alright? Like I could select these kids and move them around the screen, which could be practical in certain situations, but by and large we need a little bit more precision when we do it. So I am going to go back to that folder. I'm going to open up this sailboat JPEG image. So there's two basic ways that the selection tools work in Photoshop. And the easiest way to go through this, I guess, is to show you the more complicated way first. But 2 buttons underneath the Move tool is your lasso tools. So if I click and hold this button, you see you have a lasso tool, you have the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool. So using just the basic lasso tool to give you an idea of this, Photoshop allows you to essentially outline whatever pixels you want, and Photoshop will highlight those, and then I can do with these, whatever I wish. Now, the hand-drawn lasso tool, the normal lasso tool, it's not that useful. You're very rarely going to be like taking a boat in the background and moving it. But it exists. That is definitely an option. Most of the time you're using this polygonal lasso tool or the magnetic lasso tool. And how these work is it's a little more precise. So I can click, right now I'm on the polygonal. I can click along an image, and every time I don't know if you could hear that clicking of the mouse, but I'm just creating points along this image wherever I want. I could zoom in to get a little bit more precise if I want. I'm essentially outlining all these pixels that I want to capture. And this could be a long process. The cover of any beauty magazine with a model with like a white background or anything else like that, there is somebody using Photoshop in a computer room somewhere doing this around every strand of her hair. So like right now I'm on this bald guy's head. Like you can go really precise with this, but once you zoom out, it really doesn't matter. Like you don't need to be as precise as you think you do. So I'm just gonna zoom through this here. and you're getting the point, I'm sure. And I have to go back to the start. And then when I get back to the starting point, you can see that it shows me the little icon of the polygonal lasso tool, but now it has a little O in the bottom corner. That means I'm back to the start. So when I click there, it finishes the selection, and now I have everything kind of grouped together, which is nice because now what I can do is I can go up to Edit and Cut, and I could take away that boat from that scene and, you know, throw it in the lawn of this dorm here. Or I could use it in a more realistic way, which we'll do here in a second. But that is the polygonal lasso tool. And the second version of this is the magnetic lasso tool, which is a little bit more streamlined, but it's not as precise. The magnetic lasso tool basically looks at pixels. It looks at the contrast between pixels, and it tries to kind of hug the line. So I know that's kind of difficult to describe, but if I just click right here and I move my mouse, I'm not clicking at all. The magnetic lasso tool is examining where the contrast is occurring between colors, and it's creating the line to occur in that contrast. Or excuse me, it's creating the selection to occur in that contrast. Sorry, I'm moving the screen up with my mouse because I'm pretty zoomed in. So you can see that it's not the most exact thing, but it does a pretty good, job for the most part. If, for instance, you have like this crazy dot out here in the sky, I could just press the delete key and I can keep going back steps until I'm back on course and try it again. The magnetic lasso tool, whoa, press the delete key there. The magnetic lasso tool is good if there's a really clear contrast between like the background and the foreground. For something like this image, it's only going to do so good, especially now that we're down in the water. Like it's going to be all sorts of screwed up down here. But you get the idea. If you're going to use the magnetic lasso tool, most of the time, just because of the corrections you're going to have to make, it saves you just as much time to use the polygonal lasso tool and just kind of zoom in and make the selections. But same concept. I can cut this and paste it in, somewhere else. So that's the basic of the selection tool, and it's really nice because you could get pretty advanced with it, and it makes it nice for creating advertisements or photo illustrations or different things like that. All right, the final selection tool that we're going to talk about today is the Magic Wand tool, which is one of the more convenient tools that's in Photoshop. So we have our manual marquee selection tool, which is right underneath the Move tool. That's the one that's selected now. And let me open up an image so we can base this off of something. All right, I'm going to open up the copper tone bottle. So, like I said, we have our, first thing I'm going to do is unlock the image, the layer, excuse me. So yeah, we dealt with the marquee tool, which allows you to select images or pixels. By and large, not very useful. We have our lasso, polygonal, and magnetic lasso tools, which for something like this image is pretty helpful because of how stark the contrast is between the background and the foreground. But with an image like this, the best tool to use is probably the Magic Wand tool. And the Magic Wand tool is 1, 2, 3 buttons beneath the Move tool. And if I click and hold, it may be that the Quick Selection tool is the one that's at the forefront, but you want to click and hold and make sure that the Magic Wand tool is the one that you select. And quite simply, the Magic Wand tool, if I click anywhere in this white background now, it selects a group of pixels by the same color. So with an image like this that has an all-white background, I can easily select that background using the Magic Wand tool. Anywhere in this background, I could just click, and then I can delete the background by just clicking the delete key. And now if I go back to the Move tool, actually the next thing I want to do, because this is still selected, I want to deselect this. So I'm going to click Command D to deselect. Again, for that, because that could get kind of confusing, what I did was click on the white background, using the magic wand tool, and then I'm deleting it by clicking the delete key on the keyboard. But before I can do anything else, I have to deselect this selection. You can see that it's still selected, so the easiest way to do that is just clicking Command D. Alright, now with the background deleted, if I go back to the Move tool, I have this copper tone sunscreen bottle, but there's no background. So that means I could put it in any scene or any situation, and it's going to look more natural. So if I open up my beach scene here, I can, same way we did with cropping last week, I could go to Select All, Edit Copy, and then go into this scene and paste the sunscreen bottle here into this scene. Now I'm going to make sure my transform controls are on up here, and I'm going to hold Shift and resize this copper tone bottle, and I'm going to put it somewhere here in this scene. So the magic wand tool is great. It's a really easy tool, but it doesn't work in all situations. So like going back to our original sailboat that we worked with, you know, the magic wand tool wouldn't be great here to cut out the background, only because in a photo there's so many, you know, variations with colors that, like, if I try the background here, it's grouping in a lot of the sail with the boat, or with the sky, excuse me. If I click on the water, do you see like how just crazy it is because there's so many different shades and different things like that? Really, the magic wand tool is best used when you're cutting out something that's been like a studio photograph. So it has like an all white or an all black background, and using the magic wand tool is really easy to cut that out. As you guys go through and work on your design projects, it would be really nice if you found images that had like an all constant background, like a white or black background. So as you look through Google Images for certain things, I mean, that's something you want to keep in mind, because it makes it so much easier to delete the background and then put that element in any other photo that you wish, like this copper tone bottle right here. Alright, so your snow day homework is to create or recreate this copper tone ad here based on the assets that are in your Photoshop files folder, which is in the resources section of Sakai. But just looking at the assets here on this ad, you have your copper tone ad, your copper tone logo, which is fairly simple here, but has an all-white background, so you could easily use the magic wand tool to cut that out and put it in your ad. Same thing goes with the copper tone sunscreen. We've already kind of went over that. But there is one more thing that we need to discuss today, that if you're looking at this photo here and the original photo, and I'm going to delete that copper tone bottle, you can see that there's these ladies here in the water of the ocean, and they're not here in this one. And this is the final tool I want to discuss today. It's called the Content Aware tool, and it's actually a function, not a tool, but it's a really cool function that Photoshop does, and it doesn't work on all photos, but it for something like this it'll work really well. So basically I could choose any of the selection tools, actually not magic wand, excuse me. I could choose the rectangular marquee tool, or I could choose the lasso tool, any of these. You don't have to be very precise with this, but what you're doing is basically, I'm choosing the rectangular marquee tool. You're highlighting an area of the screen that you want to not delete, but that you want Photoshop to remove elements of that part of the screen and replace it as if they were never there. Okay, so it's one thing to say, like, I want these things gone, but then you have this gap in your image. What Content Aware does is, with this selected, if I go up to Edit, Fill, and then I make sure that Content Aware is in the usage category here, and I click OK, Photoshop removed these and replaced it with what would have otherwise been the background. It's pretty remarkable. You know, this type of maneuver, whatever you want to call it, would have taken a lot longer with older versions of Photoshop, but with the newer versions of Photoshop allowing content aware, it makes it go really quickly. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Now you can see it's not perfect. I mean, the shoreline here is kind of muted. It's one of those tools that you kind of have to play around with to make sure you're getting exactly right. If I bring them back into the picture, if I wanted to become a little bit more precise, I could get the polygonal lasso tool out, and I could just select the area of image where they are. And now going up to Edit, Fill, Content Aware, you can see that it's a little bit more precise there, which is nice. Again, to get rid of the selection, which it's still selecting nothing right now, it's Command D to deselect, and you have a canvas from which to work on. So I want you to recreate something like this. The only other thing that we really haven't talked about is turning images or turning things black and white. You can see that the Coppertone bottle has been turned black and white. The Coppertone logo has. If I open back up the Coppertone bottle, actually it's already opened. So I've already cut out the background. I'm just going to drag this into here. Right, with the layer selected that you want to modify, I know I'm sounding like a broken record with that, but with this layer selected, you go up to Image, Adjustments, and this allows you to make all of these types of adjustments. It's really, really, really important that you do it this way because it's a slippery slope if you try to start using the adjustment layers, which are over here above the Layers panel. You could do it this way. Like I could click this layer and go up to black and white and turn it black and white. But what's happening is that you're creating an effect layer as opposed to just modifying that individual layer. You're making it a little bit messier, okay? I would really recommend that you guys just with the layer selected go up to Image, Adjustments, and then from here I could turn it black and white. And it's the same effect, but it doesn't create that additional layer. You're just doing it within that layer. So I don't know if that makes a ton of sense. We could talk more about that next class, but the more precise and less messy you could be, the better. So you should have a pretty good understanding and a good start to how to recreate this image, but this is going to be your homework for next time, is to recreate something like this, add some text. It doesn't have to be and how, it could be whatever you want. And if you want to get really fancy, then maybe you can cut out the sailboat and put that in the background of your image too, along the horizon. So email me if you have any questions. Please look over the project guidelines, which are in the resources section of Sakai. All of these files, all of these working files are also in the resources section of Sakai. You should have your custom banner image custom header image for your website already done. So if you have not yet posted the link to your site, please do that. And otherwise, have a good week. Thanks.